Emotions. There are 3 schools of thought on how exactly they work. The James Lange theory states that our body's reaction to a stimulus causes the creation of emotions. The Cannon-Bard theory states that the act of having an emotion is what causes the physical changes to our body. And according to the Schachter-Singer model, both physical changes and conscious mental processing are needed to fully experience any emotion. Boring, I know. I hope I haven't lost you already. What's interesting though, is even if we don't know what causes emotion, we do know they're one of the fundamental traits associated with being human. They give us the ability to empathize with each other and to grow closer as a species. Now, film is all about evoking emotion. Having the potential to make a viewer weep or scream or laugh or inspire them to be better is what filmmaking's all about. So how exactly can a bunch of moving images make your brain experience such things? I'm glad you asked. Here's how. I'll begin with color. The rods and cones of the eye process light and make them into nerve impulses. These nerve impulses are then passed along the optic nerve to the brain's cortex, where we interpret them as various colors. Colors have a lot to do with memory as well. Your brain loves to create patterns, even if they aren't really there, and associations so your brain can work faster when it experiences new things. This is why you tend to associate emotions with different colors. Reds are usually passionate, blues are calming, pinks are youthful, and purples are royal. This obviously can be undermined by someone's own opinions and experiences, but for the most part, we as the audience know what's going on. So when color is used correctly, it can make the emotion of a scene more prevalent and easily understandable for the viewer. For example, in the Matrix films, every scene within the Matrix has a green tint to it to signify the computer simulation. Every scene in Zion is blue to represent reality. Every scene with yellow represents the machine world, red represents danger or evil, and white represents purity and the source. This is all done so even if you aren't consciously aware of it, your brain's making patterns to better understand what it's seeing. This also happens more subtly in the movie The Avengers. Towards the beginning, when Black Widow and Bruce Banner are walking through the rundown shack, there's bright green paint everywhere. This is of course a way to signify the Hulk, but also to say that the Hulk could be a more important character in the story to come. You can also use colors in the opposite way of how they're normally intended. In this scene, you know something's off because the colors around her don't match the emotion she's producing. This adds an off-putting layer to the character that would be harder to achieve without the use of color. After color comes music. Music can be essential to a film's emotions, and it all stems from receptors in your cochlea, which travel along the brainstem into the auditory complex of your brain. Now there are 2 ways in which music can match up with a film to make it evoke an emotion. The first is a syntactic match. This is when the timing of the action lines up with the beat of the music. As I said before, your brain really likes patterns, and using simple auditory and visual cues to make sense of the world. Therefore, it makes a syntactic match when someone's dancing, when the film cuts to a different shot on beat, or when an action happens in time to the music. This helps us more easily understand what we're watching and how we should be feeling. Take for instance, in this scene, the action is in time with the music to make it more comedic. But in this scene, the music makes the scene more dramatic. The next is a match through association. Now this gets a bit complicated because you can either associate through intrareferential or extrareferential means. An intrareferential association is one you make in the theater. This is when certain music plays to introduce a character, setting, or turn of events. When the music plays again, you know to associate it with what or whom it came from originally. This is why when you hear this, you think of this. And when you hear this, you think of him. And this is how an emotion is created. Filmmakers use certain auditory cues to remind the audience of how they should be feeling. Excited? Scared? Now, an extrareferential association is one you already hold before entering the theater. The best example is major and minor chords. These usually have a pleasant and jovial tone or a dark and somber one. So when filmmakers use a melody with minor chords, you know how to feel. And when they use major chords, well, you know what I'm getting at. And like color, you can use music oppositely to its normal intent. This is famously done in movies like A Clockwork Orange and Reservoir Dogs. You should also keep one thing in mind when you make films. You have the potential to make a scene more emotional with music just as much as you do without it. Sometimes the sound of silence can be more impactful than any score you use. Perhaps the most influential of all aspects of cinema is the character. Even if you don't have the necessary tools to make emotion out of color or score, you always have the character. Nothing can beat a simple close-up of someone's face to convey emotion.
Would it help if I said my facial expressions out loud?
Well, maybe.
Welcoming smile.
Delighted look.
This is especially true in psychology because people have a hard time understanding emotion on a large or abstract scale, and all that general information becomes specific when you introduce people. But the real question is, how does the emotion of a character transfer to us, the audience? In psychology, they call it emotional contagion, wherein people have a natural tendency to absorb and reflect the emotions around them. It's an evolutionary trait that's essential to social functioning. But let's go a little deeper. In neuroscience, this can all be explained by mirror neurons. They're these things in the brain that cause us to mimic what we see. If you've ever caught yourself or someone else copying the facial expressions of characters in movies or television, that's their mirror neurons. They're part of the reason why we feel empathy for others, so we cry when they cry or laugh when they laugh. Now, the main reason we aren't jumping out of our seats to fight bad guys or collapsing when someone faints is because the cortex in our brain stops us from totally mimicking what we see. And it's a good thing too. No one wants to get hit by the guy channeling Chuck Norris. There's one more thing to consider when it comes to your characters. While intense emotions trigger your mirror neurons and activate that emotional contagion, subtle expressions can work just as well by creating a blank canvas for your audience to project their own emotions on. If you don't want your characters to cry, put them in a situation where they should, but give them a blank expression. Your viewer will understand what the character should be feeling and will project their own sadness onto them. This works well too if you don't want the audience to feel a specific way, but rather leave the scene open to interpretation. So that's your rundown of basic psychology and neuroscience of cinema. So what exactly does this all mean for the future of filmmaking? Well, honestly, not too much yet. Neurocinema is a very new scientific field with very little research thus far. What neuroscientists are looking at now is how they can make films more emotional and memorable, how they can make comedies more comedic, dramas more dramatic, and as of recently, horror films more horrifying. Mindside Neuromarketing is leading the charge in applying neuroscience to feature films, with assistance from film producer Peter Katz. They're looking at how they can make movies scarier by measuring brain activity in the amygdala. This will make the scariness more quantifiable and easy to manipulate, so a filmmaker can find the perfect amount of horror to put in their movie. They're pretty much playtesting how well a movie will scare someone, and if you've ever watched Black Mirror, you might know where this could be heading.
We call this a mushroom.
But that's besides the point. Right now, neuromarketing is a growing field that's just starting to touch film. Soon, filmmakers will be able to track precisely which sequences or scenes engage or lose the viewer's interest based on what regions of the brain activate. From that info, a director can edit, reshoot an actor's performance, adjust a score, or apply any other changes to improve or replace the least compelling scenes. Movies could easily become better at fulfilling the expectations of their particular genre. So, armed with this knowledge, I hope you'll look at films a little differently now. Just know, this is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the psychology and the neuroscience behind it. I'll leave you with a quote by Jeffrey Sachs, a famous neuroscientist and avid movie watcher. Our brains didn't evolve to watch movies. Movies evolved to take advantage of the brains we have. I hope you all continue to watch films and make films and help cinema evolve, as long as you remember where it all comes from. Emotions. Moving images and emotions.